All right, here we go. All right, now we're live. I really love that practice session thing that they like. I never knew that existed until now, which is super cool. The other thing I'll say is when one of us is presenting during the Q&A, if you're not talking, just you can go on mute. That'd be awesome. But yeah, we'll give people a couple minutes to trickle in, and then we will dive right into it. And then we'll get this on YouTube tonight. Really want to play some background music, but I don't want YouTube to flag us when we upload it, which I've had happen before. So maybe I should just sing. I'm not much of a singer, but maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, music would definitely be helpful.
Like I thought if I played like older funk tracks, they wouldn't catch it, but they still did. Just, no fun. But we are here for the STEAM and hands-on learning conversation as part of the ATL Education Expo. We're going to let people trickle in for the next minute or two, but really excited. Yeah, I see your chat there. Really excited to hear from Jason Martin from Steam Truck, Ben LeBois from Breaks for Kids, and Christina Smith-Newton from Hope for Youth, aka Hype, talking about all different kinds of ways they bring STEAM and hands-on learning to the school system that is in desperate need of it, in my humble opinion. So we'll just wait another minute or two, and then we will get right into their presentations, followed by our conversation. And then we have this part where like I get to sit here and by myself quietly and like, yeah, you guys can talk to me, It's in trouble with the webinar feature.
I know. It's awkward because you know people are joining, but you can't see them. So
yeah, which is fine, but it's just like I had a really over the weekend when I took a break from getting the expo site together, a really in-depth conversation with two of my friends who have a lot of policy experience about education and where education's going and whether like we're on the right track or not. It's one of the more heated conversations I've had since the start of COVID. I, as maybe predictably, was probably on the more radical side of like, we need fundamental change. They were not. So lots of work to be done, but hopefully over the drinks that we had, I convinced two more people to sports groups like y'all.
So did the question come up whether or not COVID presents the opportunity to actually make that change? Like, is it like the catalyst that, could perhaps be that sort of once in generational opportunity?
Yeah, that was exactly what came up. I mean, we originally started talking about what businesses were really going to be impacted from the move to remote work. And then it slowly transitioned into a remote learning conversation. And, we could ask this question later, but while we wait another minute here to get the formal part of this started, I'm still skeptical that COVID is going to sort of like wholesale change, as I think a lot of us might be, just because we know how the education system works, but we all have different opinions. We can certainly come back to it later too. I think stuff just moves too fast. Like there's not enough time to actually come up with wholesale change, Like
right.
By the time we're gonna be back, and then everyone's gonna be like focused on getting back. But all right, I want to get us going. So we are here for this next conversation as part of the ATL Education Expo. It's a whole week of conversations like this. And also we have an entire website built out with information about partners here in Atlanta, best practices, interviews that we pre-recorded. So they're all available on YouTube. And tonight we are talking about STEAM and hands-on learning in education, and really what it means for the future of education. And first and foremost, I want to introduce our three guests. So we have Christina Smith Newton, the founder and CEO of Hope for Youth Inc., and also our official co-host for the expo. Ben Lavoie is the Ben. I forget your exact titles. It's what's your title?
Executive Director for Bricks for Kids Atlanta.
Perfect. Sorry about that. I should have done my homework. Sneaked your LinkedIn.
No worries.
And Jason Martin, the founder and the executive director of Steam Truck, which is part of Community Guilds. Get that right? Perfect. All right. So first and
2 for
foremost,
3, not bad.
I'm trying, guys. This is my first of several moderating discussions this week, so I'm learning a lot of lessons, as I did this morning when my Zoom crapped out. All right, first and foremost, though, we want to give each of the panelists a chance to kind of bit about their own work and their organization, and then we're going to dive into a conversation about how we can learn from groups like theirs and prepare our kids for whatever the future is going to bring. So we're going to let Ben kick it off from Bricks for Kids. And we're gonna let him take the floor for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to Christina, followed by Jason.
All right. So, hi everybody. I'm just gonna give me just a second. Whoops. Ian, thanks for the intro. For those who have not heard of Bricks for Kids, I hope that the next couple minutes are somewhat informative about who we are. I will do my best to not be very long-winded and get straight to the point. So Bricks for Kids, we're actually an international franchise system that focuses on using Lego-based learning to improve STEM education. The concept of improving STEM education I think is obviously, and I think we're going to be talking a little bit about that today, a widely debated question and premise to begin with. And for us, really, the definition of improving STEM education is predominantly through increasing engagement and increasing curiosity for students. So we are, I would not say an anti-testing or anti-metric organization, but first and foremost, our main responsibility is to develop critical thinkers and students who feel comfortable, confident, and interested in STEM. So that's really the biggest why for our organization. I've got a little breakdown here to give you guys an overview of the what, how, and why Bricks for Kids. The what being what we do, how being how we do it, and why, of course, why we do it. So what, as I mentioned, we are a Lego-based STEM enrichment organization, and we operate our programs predominantly through after school and in school programs. So depending on the circumstance, depending on the need of the school, we'll operate our programs, our Lego-based programs, either as an after school program or something that is directly in the classroom to assist with classroom instruction. We focus on targeted outcomes. So we develop targeted outcomes in partnership with our school and teacher partners, but no matter what the outcome that the school or the teachers are seeking, we always accompany that targeted outcome with a focus, as I mentioned, on critical thinking and hands-on problem solving and creativity. So we partner with the schools and teachers, we identify those targeted outcomes, and for each of those schools and partners, we'll craft a custom curriculum that's going to take the students to the outcome that we're seeking. And again, focusing and putting a huge priority on making sure that the curriculum is increasingly engaging for the students and that we are seeing a significant change in their interest in being critical thinkers in STEM and in hands-on problem solving. How we craft and create our programs, our interventions and programs in after school last anywhere from 6 to 24 weeks long. That really depends on the need of the school, obviously depends on the budget as well, and also depends on the students themselves, right? And what other activities and supplemental enrichment they have going on. Each session within those 6 to 24 weeks is focused on a specific Bricks for Kids Lego building project. So we're going to actually focus every single class on one individual project. And that project is going to be fit for purpose within a curriculum that is targeting, again, the outcome that we're looking at, and also targeting, again, this increase in critical thinking, creativity, and hands-on problem solving. There is no formal testing in Bricks for Kids. That's something that we emphasize because there is, I think, a pressure for organizations that are assisting with classroom and after school learning to have formal testing. We do have measurements that we embed into our program, but they are embedded into the program, meaning that kids are not taking a test that is separate from the activities that they're doing. We're trying to make the entire experience for kids a safe to try environment, meaning like we're trying to extract all of the typical pressures that kids feel that tend to dissuade them from being interested in STEM and feeling confident and pushing themselves to the point where they might fail. We're trying to make it a safe to try environment. And so for that reason, there's no formal testing that exists outside of our actual programming and outside of the activities the kids are doing. The measurements we implement are during the activities themselves. Why we do what we do? Learning shouldn't be fun. It has to be fun. Lego is, by no means a silver bullet for every kid is going to learn better with Lego, but it has proven for over 70 years to be a educational experience and entertainment experience that cuts across, when permitted, cuts across gender, cuts across socioeconomic, cuts across nationality boundaries. It's something that is very universal, and it's because the experience is a creator experience. And that brings us to our second why, which is that we feel that creating is the stickiest form of learning for elementary school age kids. It's the one that kids can relate to more than others for the most part, or that really stays with them, right? Is if they can be an actual actor or protagonist in their story rather than being passive. And of course, that's true for all hands-on learning, but there's something that we find with Legos that really engages the kids. And the third for us is this goes to our focus on critical thinking and hands-on problem solving. Is we try to not focus on teaching the kids what. As an example, if a school says to us targeted outcome is a specific third grade mathematics standard, of course we are working towards that outcome, but we want to equip them more so with the tools to adapt to how and what. So great if we can teach them this particular standard, but it's more important for us to be able to build critical thinking skills within these kids so that even when we're not there, now they have those processes, they have the confidence, and they have the abilities to solve a new challenge. We feel it's particularly important given the way that the world is adapting so fast, that teaching kids and focusing kids on what is less important than the other. So that's kind of the Bricks for Kids way. Whoops. And right here is kind of an example of how we focus on STEM and how we might deploy curriculum in the different areas of STEM. So if you look in the top left quadrant up here, this is an example of different Lego-based projects that we would deploy in targeting particular science concepts. So here you see a chameleon if we're talking about specific areas of biology, for example, a satellite when we're talking about astronomy and physics and so on. Below this, you see the quadrant for technology. We've got robotics, stop motion animation, remote control, sensor technology that we're trying to implement to get kids thinking about how to work in technology. Engineering, we have models related to cranes and Eiffel Towers and jackhammers to kind of get them thinking about different types of engineering. And then of course mathematics, which actually is the M in STEM for us kind of cuts across all the other three, is that there's mathematics in everything the kids are doing with us, whether it's counting in cardinality, addition and subtraction, or multiplication, fractions, and so on. For anybody who's looking at our organization and is curious to know more, I would just tell you that what we really strive to do with all of our students is really use Lego as a medium to tell them that Lego isn't really different from people who are incredibly successful or happy in their creative and professional pursuits later in life, and that if you ask most folks who are in some kind of STEM discipline, odds are they probably have their childhood roots somewhere along the lines of Lego or something similar. So we're trying to draw those parallels for kids so that they can use this as a springboard to get more confident and self-actualize in those areas.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. Really appreciate you presenting that for us. Now we're going to move on to Christina Smith-Newton and Hope for Youth.
All right, everyone. So I'm Christina. I'm the founder of HYPE, and our organization is empowering girls of color to become leaders in technology. Our mission is to give girls of color technology skills and, help them to become future leaders in tech careers through creating a pipeline of diverse talent for the tech industry. Here you can see some of the main programs that we offer. Hype offers summer coding camps. We actually just launched our coding camp application today. And so if you have a middle or high school student who's interested in participating in a summer coding camp, which will be virtual this year, you can visit our website to apply. Our main program is an after-school program called the Hype Project. The Hype Project is a 12-week after-school program with a cohort-based model where girls get a chance to, learn together, celebrate one another, support each other, as well as be taught and engage with individuals, other women in technology who represent them and represent the experiences that they've grown up in. We have an international experience, which is all a part of our, empowerment and trying to create leaders. So the international experience is an opportunity for students who have gone through the after-school program to teach what they've learned. Studies show that you retain 90% of what you teach. And so through our international experiences, girls get a chance to lead a 1-week coding camp overseas where they not only grow as a leader, but they get a chance to experience global awareness and civic mindedness through their servant leadership. We have an internship placement program for high school students. This comes on the tail end of an 8-week program called the Hype Leadership Academy. And the Leadership Academy is all about college and career readiness, where we work to empower girls with public speaking skills, resume writing skills, learn how to do mock interviews. They learn about brand and networking and creating LinkedIn profiles. They understand how to share what they can bring to the table, even and especially as a high school student. And then at the end of that, we work with companies and corporations and nonprofit organizations and startups to hire our graduates through a summer internship program, which is paid, or through a fall or spring work study program. We will be rolling out 2 other, which we call exposure opportunities this year, which is a tech conference for girls to 1-day event to expose girls to lots of different careers, tech opportunities, programs, and to begin to form community and build relationships with other girls who are also learning how to code and interested in technology. And Women in Tech Roundtables, which are college and career focused roundtables led by our corporate partners. The roundtables will focus everything on virtual and or in person speed mentoring sessions, we'll do like internship opportunities through the Women in Tech Roundtables, lots of panel discussions, but those Women in Tech Roundtables will occur quarterly. And kind of what you see across all of our programs is continual engagement with students. We definitely believe that continual engagement and growth and development is what will empower our girls to not only become exposed to technology, but to become leaders and to stick in their tech careers and to follow technology or STEM related pathways beyond high school. And our programs fall within 3 of our pillars, which are education, exploration, and empowerment. Through our after-school program and our Hype Leadership Academy, we prepare future-ready computer science girls. We give them coding skills, and we help them to gain 21st century skills that are going to be necessary to operate in the careers of our future. Through our exploration pillar, girls are getting a chance to go on career exposure field trips. They get the internship placements. They meet other women in technology, and they get a chance to explore not only the world, but they get a chance to explore their own personal interests with STEM and technology. And then lastly is empowerment, where we empower our girls to become leaders and to give back. They learn to understand their responsibility to help to girls who come behind them continue in their footsteps and to continue building the pipeline. Over the past few years since Hype was founded, we've empowered 430 girls, a little bit over 430 girls through our programs. Through the incorporation of technology, we're a tech training program, but through the incorporation of embedding technology in the way that we reach students and through our partners, our educational partners, as well as our corporate partners, we have a goal of reaching 10,000 girls by 2023. And so we're really excited to be rolling out a learning management system, that our educational partners will be able to connect to get data and reports and understand the students in their schools, what they're learning, what they're doing, and analytics behind who they are. And it's also going to help us to be able to expand and reach students, especially beyond Metro Atlanta, into some of our more rural communities as well. And so if you're interested in learning more about Hype and our programs, you can visit our website, www.gethype.org. We're on Instagram and Twitter at gethype_inc. And you can email our team to learn how you can bring Hype to your school and get your girls connected with our programs at info@gethype.org.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. And honestly, I think the three groups here all have the best names and the best websites in terms of a name wise. I'll come back to that later. Jason from Steam Truck, you're up.
Awesome. Let me just share that. All right. Can you all see that? Perfect. So my name is Jason. I'm the founder and executive director of Community Guilds. I'm going to talk about our Steam Truck programming. And for those that are listening in, you know, we just heard from two programs. I'm going to share a third. Atlanta has a lot to offer, has a lot of STEAM programs, STEM programs. And part of this is just really just getting the word out, making sure that partners, potential partners can hear this and find like the best fit. So I'm going to talk about Steam Truck. You know, even before COVID, you know, the challenge was that a lot of students didn't have access to the really sort of hands-on tinkering, learning that I really believe all kids need. And now definitely during COVID, that's even less, there's even less access. So our solution is to bring the tech and tools and teachers directly to where kids live and learn. And we hope by doing that, we do two things. One, we're intentional about where we drive and park the truck. If we do that intentionally, we can start to eliminate inequities. And then the second is if we're there and our programs range up to 20 days, we're hoping that we also catalyze opportunity, that something happens, not just to the students, but also to our adult partners during that time. So that this capacity building, this catalyzation actually happens even and continues after we drive away. So our approach is kind of simple. The first is that we bring stuff to where students are and teachers are. Most of it happens during the school day, kind of like Ben's program. It happens either during the school day or after school. The real sort of eliminating opportunities and catalyzing opportunity is making sure that we do it hopefully with the teacher, which leads to the second part, professional development. Sort of the secret sauce of Steam Truck is not just the work we do with students. It's actually having an entire class as a cohort work with us and their teacher. And over the course of the hopefully 20 days, the teachers are getting you know, deep professional development, hopefully changing their mindsets as they grow their skill sets. And then the other part is we bring a lot of amazing folks onto the campus. We have a 1-to-5 ratio. So we have artists in residence, engineers in residence, scientists in residence, technologists in residence. Christina, I want to talk to you afterwards about maybe potentially getting some of the folks that may have the bandwidth to do maybe some work on Steam Truck in order to be some of the technologists in residence that work with students. And, you know, we're here and we're on this Zoom call thinking about how can we, or at least I am, thinking about how we can start to mitigate the learn loss that COVID has hit disproportionately, especially those that haven't been able to be in person. So we believe, and we were selected by Learn for Life, that if we scale, the first is that we can be an intervention for struggling learners. Starting June 1st, right now we're all remote, but starting June 1st, or in June, our goal is to start to do Steam Truck in person. And we believe that if we can start to really target those students that have struggled the most during this pandemic, we can be a particularly effective intervention. Second, maybe over the summer, but definitely in the fall, we want to serve as a way to build up teacher effectiveness. How do we really embed hands-on learning inside the classroom? And the third is, if we do those first two things, we believe, sort of our theory of change, is that it will start to positively impact school climates. So jason@steamtruck.org, that's how you contact me. I'll kind of end with a couple sort of just nuts and bolts descriptions of the program. The first is, people ask, oh, what can you do? We have 3 programs in community guilds, 2 of which are run by Steam Truck. We have engagement programs, which are usually less than 1 day, 3 days, usually 1 day. And that's sort of like the circuses in town, carnival, Steam Truck, or one of our Steam Trucks. We have 6 vehicles, shows up and we put up tents and kids have fun. It's great, but it doesn't serve sort of the goals if you want to really be an intervention for struggling students or build up the capacity for teachers. So our next program, which is called Impact Programming, is the one that really where my heart lies. It's the one that can last up to 20 days. And that's that deep sort of experience and a cohort-based model that really gets kids to go, kind of like what Ben said, safe to try, and really start to get outside their comfort zone. We actually have 3 sort of core competencies that we work on. And as I'm sharing them, I want you to realize that how does STEM and STEAM fit into that? Because it's not necessarily a math standard, although we do work on and focus on math as a particular intervention, but really as like that 21st century skills, I think will be the foundation for whatever else you're going to do in the future. So the first is lead as a team. How can they be a lead or leader in that small cohort? Remember, they're usually in groups of 5. The second is, how can they persevere courageously, especially in a place and doing something that they may not have any experience before. Some of our tools, bandsaws, laser cutters, are not very typical in most of the schools that we teach. And that also kind of gives kids sort of an even playing field. And the third is, how can we harness all this talent to be innovative and creative? And I think if we do those 3 things, I think that will lay the sort of the foundation for kids to be successful later. And also maybe change the mindsets of teachers a little bit. So my contact information is there, jason@steamtruck.org. Please reach out, and thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. And now I'm really excited to get in the conversation. I have so many questions for all 3 of you about this, because STEAM and hands-on learning is really picking up, well, I guess a lot of steam. I did not mean to go that route with that pun, but apologies. But it's such a big deal right now. And obviously COVID has accelerated conversations about what the future of learning should look like. I want to start with a more practical question. And Jason, you sort of alluded to it at the end of your comments, but we'll start with Ben. I'd love to hear about, in your working with schools, a lot of times school leaders and teachers aren't necessarily the most open to risk taking or trying new things. And so I'd love to hear just what have you found works when trying to establish those rapports with new partners or partners who are a little bit skeptical at first in trying something new outside of the normal sort of stand and deliver type of classroom setup. So Ben, I'd love to start with your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Christina and Jason.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Ian, and when you and I had our Instagram live session, we touched a little bit on like, how do you get folks who, if we're talking, for example, particularly about educators in schools where the pressure is on to get test scores up, the pressure is on to change outcomes. How do you get them to take a leap of faith, right, on something that you're not necessarily saying, hey, X equals Y on your exact end of year testing, and you're saying, well, there's all these other outcomes that maybe are important and help to support it and so on. How do you get people to take the leap of faith? I think what we have found is we have a standard questionnaire that we approach every school with. And the first question is, if you had to pick the lowest risk spot in your school schedule, what would it be? And essentially what we try to identify there is like, if you had to give up one spot in your school because you're like, well, we're getting something cut out. There's a budget cut, right? And we have to get rid of this time slot or this particular block or this particular area. What would it be? And the goal with our questionnaire is to not pressure, but force schools into having a hard conversation of where can they take a leap of faith first with us if they haven't worked with us before, so that we can get, even if it's a super small sliver, Jason and I talk about this all the time of like, we'd love to have 20 days or 12 weeks, right? But at the onset, you come out and you say, hey, give me 12 weeks. Somebody's like, huh, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll give you 12 weeks, no problem. It's 12 weeks just drop from the sky. So so the first thing we do is we ask schools, like, tell us the lowest risk area you have in your school that you would be willing to give up. And then we try and work our program into that, or like into that times, whether it's a time slot or it's an area or it's, we try and kind of work around their stated belief, rather than approaching them and saying, hey, this is a tool that you should use in your third grade math class. Cause they're going to be like, well, you don't know what they're going through in that session, right? You don't know what they're going through in that situation. And so for all you know, you may be asking them on their highest pressure, or like least bandwidth area to bring you in. And so the opportunity cost is quite high. So the best way for us really is to start there. And then, ultimately, again, I'll reference a conversation I've had with Jason, is like, the frustrating or the difficult thing is, like, we have to, in a lot of circumstances, under promise and over deliver, because if you promise the moon to get your foot in the door, when, knowing full well that things might not go according to plan, then after that, you might lose the ability to work with that person over the long haul, which is what everybody on this panel is trying to do. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Christina, how about you? What's been your experience in trying to form partnerships that really work, especially if people have some level of just, aversion or skepticism or that type of feeling?
Yeah, so I would say that, to Ben's point, our after school program, which is like the High Project, which is our, kind of one of the main programs that we offer, the flagship program, is a 12-week program. Like, that is the way that it works. It's a cohort model. It's 12 weeks long. It definitely is difficult for schools to kind of say that they want to commit to it, especially if they don't know who we are. We've had to spend some time over the past couple of years really trying to better understand school systems, educators, like some of the goals that they have around STEM, some of the goals that they have just around performance for their school, and what does success look like for you as a teacher, for your school district. And as we begin to learn more and more about what success looks like, then we can begin to share how our programs and how this proven kind of continual engagement cohort model program can help you reach your goals. One of the things that we included in the creation of our program is the fact that we teach the after school program. We provide the instructors. We're not just trying to give you curriculum and then ask you for a bunch of data, on the other side of, how it worked, or force you to spend extra time on the front end trying to tag a teacher to provide computer science training when they don't have a computer science background. And so one of the areas that we've kind of come in to support schools that either don't have computer science curriculum or that feel that they're already overtapped and overwhelmed is by providing you an instructor from our team that will teach the girls, and not only teach your students, but work with your teachers, work with your instructors. We've worked with high schools, taking a look at their current curriculum, taking a look at how they are implementing it, and made recommendations. We allow teachers to join our after school program so that they can kind of see modeled how we engage students, whether it be virtually or in person, what types of projects we have the students working on. We have lots of guest speakers coming in from the corporate space. And so you can be a part of hearing the hottest trends in technology and what our guest speakers are talking about. And so what we're seeing now is, through implementing or allowing us to come in and work with your school and your students, it's also a form of professional development for your teachers and your staff as well. And it's professional development that you're not necessarily paying for. It's professional development simply through exposure and through being near, right, another organization that is well connected with the corporate space. And so that's kind of how we are beginning to try to work with schools and help them to see how it benefits not only the students that join our programs, but their staff as well.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I think also, like, Jason, we'll pass it to you. I just want to mention that the amount of time that goes into the planning and creation of each of what your programs do, it dwarfs the amount of time the average teacher actually gets to plan for their own class tomorrow. And so, obviously every program amazing, probably not. But I think there's a great point being made here that you guys are really, to Ben's point, delivering a ton of value because you're putting so much time into it. But you still have to kind of prove that you can deliver, the entire school to success in order to just stay a partner. Jason, I would love to hear your experiences with
Sure.
this, especially as something where you physically have to pull up a lot of times, which either I'm sure some people are like, that's really cool and amazing. Other people might be like, we don't have a parking lot for that.
Yeah.
So, what's your experience been?
And I'll start with like the challenge is the why for us really varies. Like, why a superintendent would say yes to Steam Truck is going to be different than a principal would say yes. And probably, maybe unfortunately, but probably different than even how a teacher would say yes to participate in. So let's start with the teacher and kind of focus there. I think that most teachers kind of come sort of, they're usually the early adopter teachers. The principal, obviously teachers don't pay for anything. The principal has to like pull out of their budget to kind of afford a nonprofit. But, usually most teachers are like, all right, I'm willing to give it a chance. And I think the way that we change sort of their mindsets and kind of partner is that our work starts before we even show up. Like if we're to show up with this big old truck and a bunch of stuff, I mean, I would freak out. If I would teach, I taught for 10 years in the classroom. Like if, like I had a game plan, I didn't just like not know what to do for 20 days. So sometimes I felt that way, but so the real work starts even before we show up. It's the sort of the planning with the teachers. And we really focus on a small group. I mean, when we're there all day and then we see the same cohort, we really can only see 5 teachers when you think about how a school day is.
Right.
Sort of 5 class periods. And those 5 teachers are going to be hip to hip with us. So I think that's the value prop, is that we're working with their kids, not those kids. Like we're seeing like it's their kids who are going through this. And I think that's the biggest sort of change of mindset, is they actually see us going in there. And honestly, we fail sometimes, like things just don't work. And that sort of failing forward, I think is powerful for teachers to know that, it's not always going to work. Things are not always going to come out as planned, but we're going to not kind of do it on like this, perfect setting. We're going to do it in their classroom or literally outdoors. We break up their classes into small groups and we're sort of spread out all over the place. And I think that opportunity to kind of fail forward is pretty powerful for teachers, because honestly, as a former teacher, that was the scariest thing for me. I was petrified to fail. I was petrified to look like I didn't know what I was doing in front of the kids, or in front of my principal. And I think changing some of his mindsets can have sort of lasting repercussions. But really, the way that, if I could do it in a seminar, it would be done already. Like it can't, or I haven't been able to figure it out. It really is that sort of hip to hip. We're working with your kids. We're going to do this together. And then when this time is done, we're going to actually support you a little bit longer, which is that sustaining program I mentioned before, the sort of ongoing support to kind of make sure this sticks. So I'll end there and we can always talk more.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, definitely coming from there. Fear is definitely a driving force behind a lot of inaction, right? And a lack of trying new things because, again, it's this risk aversion. I'm curious to hear how can we alleviate that in the system at large? And I'll just remind folks, if you have questions, you can submit it through the Q&A. I see them popping up and I'll get to them as they come. And we also, definitely live tweet. We're on Instagram with #ETL Expo. But I'd love to hear, just now thinking systemically, what are some things that you think we can do to really alleviate some of this pressure on schools, to give them the latitude to actually experiment and try new things? Because right now we seem to be shooting for like the lowest bar possible, right? We have these standardized tests, which we really measure most success by. And everybody knows the standardized tests themselves are a very low bar of proficiency around basic content. And so I'm curious, and I'll sort of open it up to the floor. if you have thoughts about, like, from a systemic point of view, how might we make it incentivize trying new things a little bit more than just, well, I can't afford to do that, or else, if we mess up, then it's my job. What can we do to help school leaders out?
Well, I'll tee it up, and maybe I can turn over to Christina and maybe Ben to answer more. Is that, and Ben, I was actually intrigued by the thought that it's not in a formal like math assessment that you take at the end, but it's the doing of things. I wonder how much people can be influenced, both students and sort of decision makers around that help either make our programs thrive or not, of just witnessing what happens to students outside of the standardized test. Will they be driven by seeing sort of that fire, that drive? Will they be driven by seeing the type of questions students ask of one another? Will they be inspired by the sort of interaction that happens? So I'll just stop there to say, like, until we have policymakers, funders, and principals say that they're going to be as inspired by those moments, which I think are the moments that our programs probably deliver well, we're always going to be sort of behind if we're always driven by a test score.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's, being an engineer, my first response is, well, we can look and see that it's not working. So, we have to try something different. But school education is not that simple, and I understand that. And so I realize that it is going to take some time to shift the way that we measure success and look at things. I do think that there is value to sharing success stories of students who, have gone through our programs and sharing what are they doing outside of school. I think that's a really key thing to look at. It's one of the reasons, as I mentioned, like, not only do we have this cohort model, but we have these other opportunities for students to participate in year after year, because there is research and indicators that show that if a student, participates for 2 years, in a STEM program, then chances are, they are a certain percentage more likely to choose it as a career pathway. It's similar to the financial. There's a statistic around, if you create a savings account for a middle or high school student, then they are, I think, 6 times more likely to go to college. So I think if you look at some of these indicators and some of these statistics and see how programs or products that you are looking at find indirect ways to support students in ways and give them opportunities to align with some of these indicators, and we can kind of show that as a measure, then I think that could be data that students and funders and policymakers might be able to use to kind of tip the needle a little bit. And I also think that from an organizational level, strategically, we should probably begin as a kind of external organization, we should probably begin working more closely with clusters of schools, understanding, that you might have a elementary, middle, and high school pipeline, or, kind of feeder cluster where the train of thought, and there's alignment in thinking and train of thought and in measuring, what success looks like. And if we can work with clusters of schools and really begin to make a difference in that one school or in that one school district and use that as a case study, I'm really big on not trying to go after large numbers so much as I really want to go after large impact. And so sometimes making a large impact starts with a small impact with a small cluster for 1 or 2 years, and then using that as a case study that you can kind of show to prove that, that the traditional way of education and measuring success isn't working and might not always be the best solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben, I definitely want to get your thoughts. It's just, I want to point out, it's funny that they usually only grant y'all like a couple weeks to try and do something. Whereas we continue to do the same thing for months on end that they really don't show us a lot of results. So Ben, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how can we, help the system sort of
Well,
change views on all this.
Christina gave me a fantastic nugget to get me thinking. When you started talking about sort of like, redirecting a little bit in this direction or in that direction. Ian, you and I have had conversations about, if I had it my way, right, and I could as an engineer, I could deconstruct the whole thing and put it back together. I'd be like, well, this was all put together for the Industrial Revolution, and we're not doing that anymore. So let's rip that apart. And all these things aren't really important for kids to learn anymore. So let's rip that apart. And critical thinking and the ability to learn on the fly and learn new stuff that comes down the pipeline is the most important thing, because things are changing all the time. So let's focus on that. But obviously, that's a lot to ask, right? And since we are, at least on this panel, not policymakers that can exert that kind of change, what I would sort of say is a more reasonable midway point, not really a midway point, but a reasonable way to go about it is really to not say, okay, well, standardized testing is the bane of everything, because teachers end up essentially, just not to their fault, teaching towards trying to make sure that those metrics, that they're meeting those metrics, right? That they're meeting those indicators of success, even though we know that those indicators of success that we're teaching towards aren't necessarily actually the ones that are yielding the end result we want, which is success for human beings, right? So if we can't get rid of that, then the idea is can we nudge school systems and policymakers to include another metric, maybe one other metric that's outside of that system that we know from research can be really impactful in outcomes. So instead of saying hey, well, let's tear this all apart, which again, if everybody's up for that, I'm game. But if we can't do that, what is something that lives outside of that, right? That's just one thing. And we can nudge these districts, or we can nudge these policymakers to include that, to where now if schools are being incentivized towards this metric, which is, there's a ton of different metrics that we could start with, right? Whether it's mental health and wellness, right? Whether we're talking about critical thinking, which is sort of like my dojo, if you will. So implementing, things that have been proven and tried and tested by academic research. Can we include that and nudge people towards an additional metric that's going to support this other stuff we're doing? There's a phenomenal book that is not at all related to education. And Christine, actually, the reason I thought of this book was when you mentioned the savings accounts. There's a book by a Nobel Prize winning economist called Nudge, if you haven't read it. And essentially the whole idea of the book is we don't have to make these crazy changes to make enormous changes in people's lives. So 2 examples that this guy gives in the book, and I'll get to them quickly, is one, a university, very prestigious university, when they were onboarding their professors, who are have all doctorates, are very educated people. In the beginning, when they're filling out their online forms for onboarding, the default for matching on a 401k was no matching, right? So it's just saying no, don't give me free money, don't do that. And basically what the research found is that people stick to the default of whatever it is that is there. And so the university changed the default to be 6%. And you went from 10% of doctorate professors selecting 6% to 95%. And it literally just a small change in the default. And it's the same, they did a study with a school cafeteria where you place the healthy foods. If you place the salad at eye level at the front of the line, the kids are going to pile up their plates. And then by the time they get to dessert, if you put dessert in the top right-hand corner, out of line, out of sight, when the plate is already full, less kids choose dessert. So there's little elements like that for me, if I'm thinking about we look at education kind of like this, the ship that's in the Suez Canal that's hard to turn. And then it feels like you need a million barges to dislodge it and get it back on track. What are the small incremental things we can do? And to me, it's can we insert these small things one at a time that we know are going to nudge kids in the right direction and don't require this huge overhaul?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I, for one, always knew where the dessert was in the lunch line, but I totally, point well taken. It does start with the end in mind, though. ultimately it's like, I'm sure we all have gotten questions about how do you assess success with students. And I just want to make one note. There's one question was posed by somebody: Are your programs available in rural areas? I'm just going to queue it up for each of you to answer that via chat using the Q&A function, because that's specific to y'all. But I do want to say that, and your point's well taken, is that the accountability measures are really what's driving so much of these conversations. And if we had like a critical thinking score in the end of course test alongside of like, do you know, matrices or whatever, like I think I'm very much in agreement with your line of thinking. It's like we can start to kind of rewrite or, whatever, right the ship, whatever metaphor you want to use that works for you. I do have a question, generally speaking, I'd love to get a sense for how do you think we can actually keep up with the technological change that's coming? Because, some people might look at STEAM and, say, oh, it's a fad, which really doesn't make a lot of sense because it's just the same subjects we've been doing with a more application sort of focus. But knowing that technology is going to continue to change at a rapid rate, I would love to hear how you think and how you're approaching getting to some more fundamental skills that'll make it so that regardless of whether your kids are learning coding or using a bandsaw or learning how to build things, like how do we make it so that we can teach kids things that will last, as opposed to teaching them like cursive, which is now obviously not very widely used. How do you all focus on those kind of skills and how do you measure them?
Ian, if I can hop in on this one, I have a fairly firm belief on this, that we've already done this in education, and the area that I would look at for this is language learning and language immersion. So 40 years ago or 50 years ago, how to get kids to be natively or fluently trilingual was like a giant mystery to the educational space. Like nobody really knew how to do it, and there was a lot of like, well, you do this, you do that, and if and essentially what research ended up finding is like, there are a few very clear, easy things to do. Is like, one, super early exposure to multiple languages, even if that means that kids take a couple years to develop an actual, like, identify which is their native language. The second is to like go for a proper immersion environment. So like put kids in an environment where they have to think about the world in that language, right? So you're not just taking Spanish class or French class. No, you're taking geography, or you're taking history, or you're taking mathematics in that language, right? And then the third thing is just a basic of then implementing critical thinking in that language as sort of like can you develop complex ideas within this, right? And so the reason I say that it's a blueprint is that, to me, if you look at STEM or STEAM, and I feel like I'm going to go on a limb and say that, Jason, Christina, you probably will agree with me on this. There's a lot of like whack-a-mole that people think about STEM and STEAM. They're like, yeah, let's just bring it in and then throw it in there and woo, we're doing it, and it's like, yeah, but like, imagine if somebody was like, oh, you want to be, you need to be native in Spanish. Boom, let's just take this Spanish thing and throw it in there. Boom, you got it, Spanish, right? No, that's not how it works, right? And so it's the same thing with STEM and STEAM, is that like, if we're talking about, we're raising kids to be comfortable, adept, and adaptable in a technological world, like STEM has to be a language, right? It has to be a language that they're learning from when they are like entering school. And it needs to be embedded in, as essentially like a way that they are thinking about things. And it really has to be sort of treated in that way, rather than in this way of like viewing it, to borrow your words, Ian, as like an applications-based thing, right? Of like, and I think that there's probably foundational elements of that. Like, I think Christina's, doing work in coding. I think like there are certain elements of coding that are going to be, I think it's a fair bet, ubiquitous, for a very long time. And I think that that's like a great base level thing that we can identify is important, right? But ultimately, that's my belief, is that like we've done this before. Not saying that everybody does language immersion, but we've been able to identify it, and schools are doing it more and more. What does it take to get a child to be fluent and native for good. And it's that you have to introduce it young, and you have to make it not just something you're throwing within the rest of the thing. It has to be exist in and of itself as a primary definition.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'd love to hear more about like, what does that mindset look like in your program setting, Christina, for example? Like, how do you all approach, because I know you guys use coding as sort of a framework to approach wider problem solving, knowing that things like what Ben was saying are true and things are going to come and go. How do you guys approach cultivating that mindset? And then I want to hear from Jason before we go to our last question.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief, but we definitely share that our programs are about more than code. Coding and computer science is merely a vehicle for students to learn about problem solving, critical thinking, and to grow as leaders, and to develop confidence, to be honest, in themselves and their ability to solve problems. Because when you think about the future, we don't know what types of specific skills that students are going to need, and we don't know what is going to be available to them. But if you know how to learn, if you know how to research, if you know how to work in a team, if you develop confidence in yourself to be okay with asking questions or not being right or trying something that you never tried before, I think these are skills that are going to be useful, no matter where the student goes, and no matter how far they're working. We have 5 core values. We call them the scholar profiles, and we share this with our students all the time so they never forget that these are things that we want them to learn. 1 is courage. 2nd is creativity. 3rd is community. 4th is celebration. And then the 5th is curiosity. And we say there are 5 C's, and we say if you can really begin to understand like these 5 kind of tenets and Hype Scholar profiles, then they will benefit you, whether or not you choose to become a computer scientist or a lawyer, or a psychologist. It really doesn't matter. We want you to become a leader of the future. And so that's kind of how we do it with our programs.
Yeah, no, I love that.
So, I shared our core competencies that kind of drive the program. And for us, sort of our vehicle, Christina, is actually not STEAM track necessarily. That's like literally the vehicle. But for us, it's the maker movement. I have a firm belief that humans, all of our ancestors, for a very small percentage of our entire lineage history, like learn from a classroom setting. We learn by making things with each other, learn how other people make things. And I think if we forget that that is most of human history, we disregard a powerful way for all of our, I was just going to say ancestors, how they learned. So for us, the maker movement and making things is sort of the drive. Specifically for a program though, there's intentionality for like the 20 days that we start off with like 1-day builds, 2-day builds, to 3-day builds to kind of gradual release. All these things and sort of the things that happen in the first sort of third of the program kind of gets to the second third where they start to apply these skills. But if we just stop there, we wouldn't really have the sort of the full thing. It's really that third part, which is where they then take on a real problem and design a solution, build something together. That's where it all comes together for us. And if you were to kind of like stop or just do a little bit of it, it's, it'd be fine. But really it's the continuity of the entire experience, I think, leads to the outcomes that I think are powerful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think all 3 of you have been really talking about just making it so that students grow up to be adaptable, right? And they can critically think and adjust, because Christine is absolutely right. We have no idea where the future is going to take us. I just finished a book about how biotechnology is the next big thing. And we're not even sure, like, CRISPR and gene editing is going to be the thing. And kids are going to be at home, biologists, biohackers instead of coders next generation, which is totally possible, right? Who would have thought, the computer generation was next? So I want to close by combining 2 of the questions we got from folks in the audience, which relates to this adaptability. The first part of the question, and I'll ask each of you just to answer both parts, is around the digital divide. So obviously the pandemic has exposed what a lot of us already knew existed, but this digital divide that has made it so that low-income students are even worse off when we're doing all these things virtually. And so I'd love to hear about how you all approach that divide within your program. And then the second part of the question is, when it comes to the virtual programming options, do you plan on continuing those after we've, escaped from COVID? So why don't we start with, we'll just, on my screen, I'm gonna go up the screen. So we'll go Christina, Ben, and then Jason, you can finish out for us.
Okay, so one way that we have addressed the digital divide when everything was virtual was by utilizing some of our partners to provide not only our programs are free, but to provide devices and laptops to computers. A lot of the schools gave their students Chromebooks. But the Chromebooks did not always allow for them to access websites or programs if it were not the schools like Google Classroom. And even with the Chromebook in and of itself, if you're doing coding, it might not have the, kind of like the hardware storage capacity and capability that was required for our program. So we were able to provide students with laptops and, hotspots and things of that nature. We also launched a scholarship for high school students this past year as well, who, wanted to continue pursuing STEM. So that's one way that we try to address the digital divide. We will continue to offer our programs virtually, even post-pandemic. I won't go into it too much here, but I definitely invite anyone to send me an email to kind of talk and have a conversation about what that looks like. But, at a high level, what I mentioned that we are building this portal and kind of online learning management tool to support our ability to continue providing virtual programs to classrooms. So right now, students join our programs individually, independently. They register, they apply, they sign up, and it's after school. We're beginning to work with schools and school districts and partner with them so that they can have a club, like a Hype Club at their school. And whenever students go back to school in person, this Hype Club can continue to meet together. They can continue to, build community and relationship. And we can continue to join them virtually for a weekly kind of live virtual instruction session. And that will not only allow us to work with one group of students, but if you have 8 schools joining at the same time, this live virtual programming lesson, then you have all of these students, 20 students across 8 different schools, all in their own, kind of small communities. But then they're getting a chance to form online community with students at different schools and school districts and even rural communities as well. And that's something that our students really enjoy, is being able to meet and connect with girls who they don't go to school with, and understanding that there are so many people who are just like them. So that's kind of one of the ways that we're looking to continue offering virtual programming beyond COVID.
Awesome, thank you. Ben, how about you? What do you guys do to really try to address this digital divide? And, especially during COVID and then post-COVID, what, if anything, will you continue doing virtually?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is not what we do, but something that should happen is that digital access, I think, in 2021 should be a human right in this country. So that's the first thing I'll say. You can't get a COVID vaccine appointment if you don't have an internet connection. So like, if you can't get the vaccine for the pandemic that's ravaging the country and shutting everything down because you don't have internet, and that's, I feel like, that's as good of an evidence as any that like our entire infrastructure is predicated on the idea that you can access the internet successfully and easily. So I think, largely, of course, Bricks for Kids isn't doing that, but I definitely encourage anybody who is engaging in like, whether it's as an activist or as a voter in the, in this space, is advocate for internet access to be a human right. I think it's a really basic thing that would change a lot for disadvantaged communities. One thing that we did during the pandemic was we created crowdfunded buddy pods, which were basically, we opened it up for anyone. Could be a teacher, could be a grandmother, could be anyone who essentially would go through a GoFundMe or another a platform of their choosing through our organization to start a crowdfunded page to bring our program to create essentially a local geographic pod to where the kids actually are, right? And we had a lot of iterations of this. We had some iterations where it was like, in a particular neighborhood, there was someone who was advocating for a specific set of kids they already had in mind. Another was, some random person that doesn't even live in Georgia who created one and was like, hey, who wants to hop on here? And we had to kind of figure out, okay, well, now we have this money that got raised. How do we find kids for that to work, right? And so we did these kind of these pods, and what we did in order to sort of be able to do our part in addition to sort of going out there was making all of the programming actually digital lists. So we would leave our physical equipment with kids with paper printed instructions to be able to work on stuff before the next session, so that if they didn't have access to digital hardware or internet access at home that was reliable, they could still continue to engage with our program and homework assignments right before the next session. We are going to be continuing to offer digital courses, which we were offering pre-pandemic as well. The question for us coming out, and I'll be very transparent, is like, we don't really know what that's going to look like yet, because a lot of our digital programming in COVID has hinged on students not being able to be at school. So they're engaging with our program because they're not at school. So what we're trying to ask ourselves is like, what is not how do we continue to be digital after COVID, but how can being digital be useful to kids after COVID? And I think we're still wrestling with that question. So we're going to continue to offer something. What it is definitely a hot topic in our organization right now.
Got it.
I'll be short and answer that. You know, the first thing is we immediately partnered with someone who could locally here who could give stuff to kids. So Brown Toy Box was a local organization. And we said, all right, the kids that we serve, we can't bring Steam Truck, let's give them something. And so they already had these boxes, let's give them that, and then we'll kind of work with those kids. And then eventually we started to create our own boxes during COVID and with lots of logistical challenges, hand those things out, and then our staff work with those kids. I think I think we did what we could do during COVID and still kind of stay true to our mission. I think once we're sort of past this, I believe that there's something really powerful about hands-on learning that just can't be done virtually. Relationships, it's hard to foster, as well as just the physicality of it. That said, I think the real lessons that we're going to learn is we're almost so analog in our approach pre-COVID that we're like, hey, actually maybe we should have an LMS system for tracking students. We are so I think we're going to take some lessons learned for COVID to make our program more powerful. All that really didn't answer the question on the digital divide, which I'll kind of echo what everyone else said. I think our answer is like we go there and we go in places that may have some sort of opportunity gap and provide that, but we don't have a million trucks. It's not a real solution. So going back to like what Ben said, I think it's really up to us as stakeholders and policymakers to make this make it not a digital divide going forward. So I'm there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Awesome.
A lot of this is about advocating, right? And too often, I think people put pressure on organizations like each of yours to solve every problem and fix it. When reality, like the problems are so much bigger. But at the same time, you all have a vantage point that is extremely valuable, and sharing that perspective and that experience is super important. So with that, I'm gonna close this out. I want to thank Jason from Steam Truck, Ben from Bricks for Kids, and Christina from Hope for Youth, aka Hype, one more time. We really appreciate y'all taking the time. Also encourage everybody, our next conversation is tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. We will be talking about post-secondary success with Achieve Atlanta, College Aim, and One Goal. Obviously, like what do kids do after high school is still an enduring question, enduring challenge. So I shared the calendar invite in that. You can easily just go and save it to your calendar. But thanks so much again, Jason, Ben, and Christina. This has been a conversation as part of the ATL Education Expo. We appreciate you all being with us.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Thanks,
You
everybody.
too.
Have a good one.
Bye.